All right, everyone. Well, welcome. I'm Mr. Butner, the school counselor intern with Mr. Yates, and this is my last day. I'm so sad about that. And so, anyways, this is my brother-in-law, Mr. Jared Ramos. We're good buds, and he's just one of the most talented, creatively visual people, and I know that a lot of you guys have that as well. Jared's been able to utilize a lot of his creativity in all kinds of different projects, whether it is from photography or graphic design. And so he's kind of like he knows a lot of different programs. He knows a lot of different things that, in fact, a company has picked him up on that, and he's working professionally within a big company. And if you were with us with our last photographer, she had her own business, and that is a little bit different than what Jared is doing, even though Jared does have the capability of doing side jobs and things like that too with the skills that he possesses. Um, so yeah, this is Jared Ramos. Jared, you can take it away.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared. That was a really great introduction. You made me sound really cool. So thank you for that. Yeah, so I am the vice president of marketing for a company called The Ugly Company. We are a company based out of Kingsburg, California, so not too far from Fresno. What we do is we take fruit that would be dumped because of the way it looks that grocery stores would not take, and we upcycle it, which means that we just basically reuse it. We cut it up, we dice it up, we put it into some pretty packaging, and we sell it. So it's really good for the environment, and we're reducing food waste, which is a really cool thing. So my job as the marketing person, the head of marketing, is to basically make the product as presentable and sellable as possible. So I do that through various ways. My primary trades are photography, graphic design, web design, videography, cinematography, things like that. So those sound like a lot of words, but there's a ton of stuff that's little details here and there within those subjects. So I want to just share kind of some things that I do, and I'll reference the programs that I use as well for those of you who are interested in doing something similar to what I do. That way, in case you ever wanted to mess around with these programs, you can, and what they would be used for. I think that's really beneficial, especially because when I was your age, I did not have access to these types of programs. This is the most accessible time in our lives where, even at your age, you can go and pick up and do a similar type of thing to what I'm doing. Maybe not at a professional level yet, but you can gain the skills in order to do it at a professional level later on when you're older. So yeah, let me just walk you through some stuff that I do, some programs that I use, and if anybody has any questions during the time I'm kind of showing some stuff off, please interrupt me. I don't mind at all. But yeah, I'll get started. Okay, so this is just a nice picture of me, explaining what I do. Like I said, graphic design, web design, photography, and videography. These are things that I've been doing for quite a bit of time. I think I started doing photography, web design when I was a sophomore in high school. I'm 28 now, so gosh, this was a long time ago. But I actually started in school. This is the cool thing about programs in school nowadays, and even back then, I only had access to a couple of different programs. Photoshop was around, animation type stuff was around, and obviously photography and videography, but not to the extent of what we have now. So I was fortunate enough to take a class where I learned about these types of things. So let me just go through some programs that I primarily use, and I'll touch back on what I used to use. So Photoshop here, and let me actually do this for you so I can point at it. Photoshop here, this is a photo manipulation software. So what you will do with Photoshop is basically make anything you want, really. You can manipulate photos, you can add text, you can do certain type of graphic design, all within the scope of Photoshop. So I'll give you some examples of some Photoshop stuff here. So this here is a really good example. This is a photo that I took of a piece of fruit that would be considered ugly to sell. So this is the type of fruit that we would take and dice it and cut it and put it in a package. So here's a picture with some text on it. So it's a manipulated photo, right? So there's a picture, you have text over it, you have a logo on the bottom. So this would be considered a manipulated photo, which I did in Photoshop. So there are certain things that you can do in other programs, but Photoshop is the primary one that you would do this type of thing in. Illustrator is a really good one. For those of you who are into graphic, just artistry, if you're wanting to be an artist, digital artist, things like that, you would primarily use programs like Illustrator that deal with a thing called vector imaging. Vector imaging is basically a picture or a shape or something that isn't pixel involved. So what it means is you can blow it up as big as you want and you won't lose quality. I'm sure that a lot of you probably have phones or are familiar with pictures. When you zoom into a picture, it looks really pixelated if it's not a high quality picture, or you even get to the point of zooming in so far that it does become pixelated. So that's because pictures are made out of things called bitmap imaging, where it's made out of pixels. But with shapes and text and similar things like that, you aren't dealing with pixels. You're dealing with a thing called a vector. So you can blow it up as big as you want. So that's ideal for advertising, physical advertising, such as like business cards, flyers, billboards, things like that. So you would use Illustrator for that type of thing. Like I said before, I also do videography, cinematography. After Effects is a huge program. A really, really good program to use if you are interested in videography, cinematography. This is really just as self-explanatory as it can get. It's just adding effects after the video is edited or during the editing process. So effects such as glitches, if you want to add text, if you want to do some crazy, color changes, whatever it ends up being, you can be as creative as you want with this program. That is the program to use. It's the industry standard, and it is available to everybody. I mean, you can get it, I think, for like $20 a month, very cheap, which is wild because, like I said, when I was growing up, it was like $1,000 just to be able to use this program. It's pretty crazy. So another thing I use in my job is Acrobat DC. This is kind of the boring program here. You don't do anything other than make PDF formats, which is just a portable document format. It's mostly what adults use to send information back and forth or to fill information out. So that's probably the most boring part of my job, is having to do this. So not my favorite program to use, but yeah. So Premiere Pro is an editing software for videos. This is basically where you would go in and splice the footage that you have taken in order to edit your video. You can also add text. You can do some sort of effects, but mostly it's for color grading, which just means coloring your video, or a lot of you would know that as like adding filters or stuff to pictures. You can do certain things like that. So that is a program that's what you do it for. So Lightroom is the next one on my list, and this one I actually probably use second most. This is a photo editing software. So similar to photo editing softwares like VSCO, things like that, which are really popular mobile apps that you can edit photos on. Lightroom is a really popular one in the Adobe software suite. So basically, you can do anything you want to in order to edit this photo, whether it's through coloring, size manipulation, a lot of stuff like that. If you want to crop a photo, like add sharpening, grain, whatever effect you wanted to add to the photo, you can do it with Lightroom. So this is a really, really powerful tool. And actually they have a free version on mobile. So if you have an iPhone or an Android, whatever mobile device you use, you can actually download Lightroom Mobile, and it's free. And you can kind of get used to how it works, right? So within photography, you have certain scopes, and I won't touch too much on this because you had a photographer last time, but you have exposure and contrast and certain, words that mean certain things in editing. when I was growing up, the best way to understand how to edit a photo, how to make it look good, was trying literally anything I could. I don't have any rules, and in fact, the teachers, when they teach you rules about photography, videography, everything is subjective. Nobody can tell you what looks good. Only you can decide what looks good, and that's kind of the beauty about being creative in this type of thing. With a photo, make it look however you want to. Mess with whatever you want to mess with in order to make it look good. Don't follow a rule. There's no rule that there really is just no rule. Okay, so those are the primary programs that I use in my everyday job. So I use these programs every single day in what I do, whether it's through social media marketing, which is basically posting on different social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, some other ones. Whether it's a picture, an advertisement, if I'm putting money behind something, and I'm sure all of you probably have, if you have Instagram or Facebook, you've noticed an advertisement every few posts. I'm the one that contributes to that because you build a brand, right? That's how you build a brand. So yeah, these are the programs I primarily use. Really recommend these programs if you're interested in some similar stuff that I do. But on the bottom, I have listed some programs that you might use if you were in my job. I personally do not use these, and I'll kind of explain why. So below here, we have Animator. This is a Flash animation, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with animation, whether you watch like a cartoon, animated show, whatever it ends up being. They use animators like this. This is an animator app you can make, crazy animations with. I don't use this, though I have used this in the past. I don't use this for my current job because I don't really need to. It's mostly product based. So all I really focus on is taking pictures of products or making graphics centered around that product. But Animator is a really cool app. And if you ever find yourself in a business where you're required to do something like this, it's definitely a good tool to learn in order for you to, get the job doing that. InDesign is a similar program to, it's kind of Photoshop and Illustrator in one, but it's really centered around templates, which basically means, Adobe or whoever created this, basically a fillable design. So if you want to go in and change text, but keep the same picture that someone already had in there, you can go do that. So that's InDesign. You could also start from like a blank slate and be as creative as you want to with InDesign. Like I said, it's literally Photoshop and Illustrator in one. It's just not something that I do. I like using these separate because I do different things on different programs, and then eventually I'll bring them together if I need. But I find that the tools in InDesign just don't fit my current workflow. InCopy is one that mostly journalists use. So if you're familiar with any sort of press, InCopy is something that they use. It's just a text formatting tool. So you can go in and you can write a whole paragraph, or a whole paper or something that you want to do. And there are certain manipulations that you can do to actually format that text to fit whatever you want to do. I don't really do that. If I'm ever writing something, it's really not that long. And I kind of already have an idea of how I would want to format something. So for those of you who like to write, I would definitely look into InCopy. They have free trials and stuff like that you can do. It's a really fun program to mess around with. But like I said, for me, I don't use it in my current workflow. So Dreamweaver, which is the last of the programs that I'll touch on, this is a web design program. I've been designing websites since my sophomore year in high school. I started off with Dreamweaver. What this program does is it helps you design a website with coding a website. So for those of you who aren't familiar with coding a website, it's basically just a ton of formulas and numbers in order to make a text box a certain color or a text a certain color, and then at its simplest form. But then of course you can do crazy stuff with code and make very, very crazy websites. But if you guys aren't into that, I won't bore you as much. It's just a really cool program for that type of thing. Nowadays you have, and a lot of you will be familiar with this, I'm sure, You have programs like Squarespace, which I'm sure you guys have probably seen ads on, Squarespace, Wix, things like that, where they're called HTML builders. So they're websites that basically took the code that you would do yourself, but they have it already in there for you. So all you have to do is go in and design it how you want to, which is a really, really nice thing for me specifically because I love to design. That is what I do. I don't like to sit around and waste a ton of time coding. It's just not my favorite thing in the world. I would rather, mess with colors and shapes and pictures and stuff like that, just to kind of get my vision of something out as opposed to coding something. So that's a little bit about the programs that I use. Like I said, there's a ton more, and there's different companies that you can do that offer similar programs. Adobe, the Adobe suite is basically the industry standard on whatever level you are, from beginning to the absolute best of the best professionals. They all use these apps. And like I said, very, very accessible to every single person, which is a very, very cool thing. I think we live in a really, really cool time where creators can be as creative as possible, no matter what age or skill level they are. So that's a really cool thing. So I'll get into some of the things that I do for my work, whether it's pictures or graphics. And I'll touch on what I end up using, what programs I use, why I chose to use those programs within this. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. So here's a picture of our product. This is what we sell. This is the packaging that we sell it in. We are called Ugly, the Ugly Company. So kind of a funny name, quirky name, but very, very self-explanatory. Why we're called Ugly, it's because we take ugly fruit that it tastes really, really good. It just won't make it to the grocery store because it has a scratch or something on it. So this is what we package it in. This is what we sell. We're available in a ton of grocery stores. I think we're coming up on, 1,000 grocery stores now, nationwide, primarily in Whole Foods, which you guys should be familiar with, and then a lot of LA-based smaller chains, getting into Costco soon, Kroger. So yeah, it's really cool. This year, a little cool fact is for 2021, we are actually the top trending snack in Whole Foods for 2021. Which is a really, really cool thing for us because we're a fairly new company, started 2 years ago. I've been with the company for the last year and a half. So very, very cool, milestone that we've come across. And the whole grocery world is a different world in and of itself. I just like to make things that look cool. So it's nice to see, hey, I made something look cool, and now I can have some sort of accolade for that. So this is the back of the bag. Again, it's very, very design centric. You have a bold color like orange. Orange is a very, very bold color, but it's also very pleasing to the eye. When you get into color science, for those artists in here, when you get into the science of color, when you actually start researching color, you'll know that some of these colors attract the person a lot more than other colors. So for example, orange is a lot more pleasing to the eye than, let's say, purple, right? Of course, that's subjective in certain cases, but just in and of itself as a science, that's what it is. So with design specifically, you can see the kind of text that I decided to use here. Bold text mixed with kind of a fun text to break up the thing about like reading the same thing over and over again. You basically are reading one paragraph, but it doesn't look the same. So you're not as strained, and you're more inclined to actually read the back of the package instead of just, the same text over and over again. It gets boring. You don't like this. So you want something to break it up. So that's kind of the approach here was, kind of just this main paragraph, like you're preventing 2.2 pounds of ugly fruit from becoming waste, which is a cool thing by itself. But just adding this little touch, pretty cool, huh? That relatable touch is important. So that's kind of the thought process with these types of things. And for those of you who are interested in designing products or certain things, like you can learn a lot from studying products. A designer has every tool at their disposal at this level, and it's really just, if you start to study these products, you can really, really hone in on why the designer chose to go this route. You can learn a lot from what they actually do. It's just a cool thing. So for those of you who are interested, go to the grocery store one day or when everything's open, right? And just go start looking at products and really trying to understand why this person did this, how it makes you feel. That's the best advice I can give. So that's kind of the thought process with that. Here's just a picture. So this is an example of like a social media advertisement that I had just ran actually in the last month. Very simple picture. I put it in a bush at my parents' house and took a picture. I didn't have this crazy set. I didn't do any of this, crazy stuff. All I did was I placed this picture on a bush with flowers around it, and I snapped a picture. I did edit this in Lightroom, which is one of the programs I touched on earlier, but very, very minor editing. I changed some exposure, which means you make the picture lighter or darker, things like that. And that's about it. That's all I did. I did not add a filter. I did not do any of that stuff. It is all through the actual camera, which I'm sure the photographer you guys met with kind of touched on. So I won't bore you with that stuff. But yeah, so this is an example of just a social media advertisement that I ran, put some money behind and stuff like that. So I already showed you guys this picture, but this is another example of Photoshop manipulation. So this one is a really good example of Photoshop manipulation. So there are different shapes here, different types of text formatting. You can see here this little star I made. I have what's called a Wacom tablet or a Wacom tablet. Basically just is a tablet where you can use a little pen and draw on. You digital artists will understand if you're using this type of thing, or like an iPad or something. You can just draw whatever you want to draw and put it into the apps that you're using. So I made these stars and this heart here and just kind of filled in some colors and matched our colors with the color of our bags, and changed. I just made this whole composite in Photoshop, using different types of texts, different fonts, shadows, things like that, just making it as eye-popping as possible. This is another example of a banner ad that I had run. This is actually one of the ads that was featured in Whole Foods. So that's really cool. To be able to see that this was a printed thing in Whole Foods, and to be able to see that was really cool because, for a long, long time, I designed things for myself before I did anything professionally. So when you actually work for a company where you can get stuff like this printed and put into a ginormous grocery chain, it's a really cool feeling, and being able to see that. So that's again an example of Photoshop. This is just another kind of product-esque photo. Your last guest talked a little bit about product photography, so this is an example of that, where it's just a bag with kind of whatever the subject is, right? So in this case, it's bananas. So there's a picture of bananas behind the bag, just as some sort of product photography. Yellow is obviously a really, really nice color to look at. It's very warm. It's cool. So that's kind of the thought with that. And I did this with Lightroom and Photoshop. So this is a combination of both of those, taking a picture, manipulating the picture as far as background goes. This picture was not taken on a yellow background. It was actually taken on a green background or green screen. And then within Photoshop, what you can do is you can change the color of the green screen. It's called a key in or a key out is what it's called. So that's kind of what I did there. If you guys are interested, I know that right now, gaming and streaming is really popular. I'm sure a lot of you guys probably watch streamers. You probably see some streamers with a green screen behind them, or it looks like they're like in the game almost. So this is the type of thing that they do. They use what's called a key in or a key out, a green screen. So it just makes it so the subject behind can be whatever you want it to be, which is really cool. So, with the bananas in the picture of the bag, I could have put it in like a field or whatever I wanted, on the beach or something. So that's kind of that.
Hey, Jared, just FYI, you have about around 5 minutes just so that we can save some time for questions.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll run through this real quick. Okay, so another example of product photography, I'll just leave it at that. Just some more of the bags. So this is a video, which I'll play briefly just so you guys can see. This is something that I shot with my work to kind of show what we do and why we do it. So this is, the title here is Saving 45,000 pounds of ugly apricots from being wasted. That's a huge part of my job, is to educate people on why food waste is not something that we should be doing, and why it's important to prevent that. So I'll briefly play just some stuff here. I'm gonna actually fast forward so I don't bore you through all this type of stuff. Okay.
Right now, I'm about to take this load of 44 bins of ugly apricots up to get cut and dried. It's pretty cool because they would have all been tossed out if we weren't doing this. So it's a nice, rewarding part of the job. And right now, there's probably 2 to 4 million pounds of fruit a day within a 10-mile radius where I'm staying that's going to get tossed out. So, we're saving 44 to 45,000 of those pounds today, but it's really kind of just a drop in the bucket if you think about it. So we got big plans to try and do more, but at least we're taking a step in the right direction.
So that's just an example of some video that I would take, just to kind of get the point across of why we're doing what we're doing. If you guys are interested, you can follow us at Pack of Ugly if you have Instagrams or Facebook or whatever. Follow us and you can kind of see all of these things for yourself more in depth if you're interested in that. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have for all of you. Here's just another example of a graphic I made for Whole Foods and Ugly when we did a collaboration. So this was cool. And then just a concept of what we do. So this was more of like a fun project for me. We are in the process of making juice with all of our fruit. So this will be a whole new product that we're introducing to the product line, which is really cool. So I got to have fun and kind of design what I think the juice bottles would look like. So this is just more of a concept of what I would like it to be, though I'm not sure if we'll end up going with this. It depends on the production, but just an example of some fun that you can have when you're actually working within a company. Even though you have certain rules that you have to follow within your branding, you can do little side projects like this and have it be fun. So yeah, that's all I got. And this is really cool to show all of you guys kind of what I do. And please, if you have any questions, I'm an open book, ask me anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared. And you guys, you can either unmute or you can type in the chat if you have a question.
Yeah, I forgot there's a chat.
So I have a question, Jared. So the bags, you designed the bags, and now there's a bottle that you designed. Now, did you use like an animator for like the actual like square and the color? And I mean, how did you do that?
Yeah, so you use primarily what you would do. That's a photo manipulation. So you would do it in Photoshop. But with all of the text and the like picture, let me share my screen one more time so I can kind of show it again. So with this specifically, if you look at the bottle, so the bottle I found on Google, I didn't do anything crazy. I just found a bottle on Google. All of the text within it, I did in Illustrator. So it's a vector image, right? So I can now manipulate whatever I want to, and it won't lose quality. So then what I did was I took it from Illustrator as a vector image, imported these bottles into Photoshop, changed the color of all of this within Photoshop, and then attached my vector image on top of the bottle. there's a lot of steps in between that, but in its simplest form, it's taking something from Illustrator to Photoshop and then combining the two. So yeah, that's an example of using both programs to, you know, kind of get your point across your design.
Max asks, is that program for editing videos or pics?
After Effects. So you can actually do pictures with After Effects, though it is primarily a video editing software. What actually a really popular thing to do is, I don't know if you guys have seen videos where there's a ton of pictures kind of flashing, almost like a slideshow, but it's inside of a video. That is done within After Effects or Premiere, primarily After Effects though. So you can do a ton of crazy cool glitch effects or any type of effect that you want to with After Effects. So very cool program, but yes, it's definitely more geared towards video. Okay, so you can, if you just Google After Effects, it'll pop up. The website's adobe.com, but it'll pop up on Google. And there's a free trial that you can do. I'm not familiar with how long the trial is. I believe it's a week, maybe up to 30 days. But the program itself should only be, if you want to just do video editing, it should only be, I think, $20 a month, which is a really cool price. That's great. Like I said before, it was like $1,000 when I was in school trying to do it. So I couldn't do it before, but now I can. It's accessible.
Okay, I have a question. Oh man, I forgot my question actually. Oh, Caroline has a question. How long does it take to edit something?
So it depends on the composite. If you're talking video does take longer because actually the longest part about editing a video is going through the amount of footage that you shoot for that video. So for example, that video that I just showed you, it's a 2-minute long video, but I probably have, I don't know, an hour of footage. So I have to condense an hour of footage into a 2-minute video. And that's a really time consuming process because you have to go through the best shots. You have to make sure everything is focused, or if something is out of focus, it's artistically put in there. So it's not a main shot by any means. What would be considered a B-roll shot. So it depends. I think that probably took me 2 or 3 days to finish editing. So that's for a video. That's pretty common. In terms of a Photoshop, like that concept I made of the bottles that I showed, that took me, I think, probably 30 minutes. But that's because I was really inspired and I had this clear vision in my head of how I wanted to do something, and I just did it. Though it doesn't happen like that all the time. And I'm sure that you creative people in here understand that sometimes things don't happen when you want it to happen. The magic just isn't there, right? I have done so many projects where I have the motivation and I have the clear idea of how to do something, and I can do it in 5 seconds or 5 minutes, whatever it is. And then another time where I will be asked to do something and I just have no idea where to start. I have no idea how to even, begin the process of designing something. It's just something that if I find myself not being motivated at that moment in time, I'll go do something that clears my mind, just so I can come back to the computer with kind of fresh eyes. I'll literally remove my eyes from the computer screen and put it somewhere else, because when you stare at a computer screen for so long, and you guys, now that you're doing school through Zoom, probably understand this, it is the most straining and taxing thing. I personally do not like it. So I have to get up from the computer every now and then. But that's how the motivation stays fresh, is not designing or trying to do something all of the time. You have to take some time away from it.
I have a question. How do you learn to do this stuff?
Yeah, so like I said, I was in school. My high school was fortunate enough to have a media class. However, I did not like to be doing it in class. It wasn't my favorite thing. The curriculum, it was very simple. It was like, hey, make a box and put some text inside the box. And while you're learning the program, that may seem like it's hard. It was also for my imagination very, very boring. Like I felt more limited in class than I did outside of class, because I felt like even though I'm being taught on how to do something, I'm being taught a way that I don't like to be taught. I want to be able to learn how to do it myself. So everything that I have learned, whether it's web design, photography, videography, learning how to use the camera, editing, the photos, the videos, product design, anything that I do, I have just learned by myself. I have not learned from any person. There are times where I'll go to YouTube if I know what I want to do, but I may not know how to do it at that very second. I'll go to YouTube. YouTube's the best tool. Everybody definitely utilize YouTube. That's the most amazing thing ever. But I learned everything myself. I didn't have a teacher that taught me how to do these things. It's just letting your mind be as creative as possible and messing with as many things as you can until you find your style, and you're comfortable with the program.
Any last questions? I would say maybe we have time for possibly one question.
I see someone said, what's the hardest part of using Photoshop? I think the hardest part about any of the programs that I listed is the learning curve of how to use the program. That right there is the most limiting thing for all designers. If you understand how to use the program, whether you learn from YouTube or just going in and experiencing it yourself, going through a list of the menus, a list of the tools and just trying things out. As soon as you learn a program, you can do anything that your mind wants to do. That's just, the reality of it is you have to learn how to do this type of thing in order to get to this type of thing. With software, it's the exact same thing. So I would say that is the hardest part. It's not putting your mind, to something and being able to create something. It's learning the program in order for you then to go and create it. You already have the idea in your head. So definitely learn the programs. That's the hardest part. But when you get over that curve, you'll be golden.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Ramos.
Yes.
Much appreciated. Super inspiring. And you guys, I believe we will have the recording of this on Mr. Yates's counseling site. And so if you want to take a look at those programs one more time, you're obviously welcome to look back. There's a lot of information that was given and that you'd be able to refer to. So enjoy the rest of the 1 minute of your lunch.
Thank you.